Hello, I am an aeronautical engineer by training. This also has to do with my hobby. I have been fascinated by aircraft since I was 7. To this day, I am mostly building scale replicas of flying machines. Not exclusively though. Every now and then I do pick up a kit of a different subject. A couple of years ago, I was researching various techniques for weathering and watching a lot of videos of armor modeling, as we all know that AFVs like to get down and dirty. Well, let's just say that I was inspired to build a tank. More specifically, I was curious about rust and peeling paint. Aircraft don't rust much. They are mostly built out of aluminum or wood and canvas, none of which corrode. Wanting to try my hand at this, I decided to build an abandoned tank. Soviet T-34, an old-time icon, the most produced tank of the World War II and one of the longest serving in history. But I wasn't to make another T-34 advancing on Berlin. I searched the web for ideas and found many indeed, in a varied congregation of colors and states of battle unreadiness. It would have been enough for a whole line of unique T-34 models, and even if I failed to finish one to my standards, there would be always a plan B. Another fun fact about me is that I come from a land that does not exist anymore. It was called Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. It ceased to be in the 1990s through a series of bloody secession wars of its republics, culminating in NATO-organized fireworks over Serbia in the 1999, to mark the end of the millennium, I guess. I will not go in history of Yugoslav disintegration, but I will tell you that the T-34 was used in great numbers by almost everyone involved. I mean hundreds of them. In Bosnia, for example, Serbs, Croats and Muslims all used this vintage World War II weapon against each other. So I finally decided to build my T-34 as unspecified remnant of this war. A forgotten rusty tool, fading memory of something that was and is no more. A ghost in a shell. The kit I found for my project is this Ryefield model T-34-85 in 1/35 scale. It is a nice, accurate and simple representation of the late type tank with the 85mm cannon. As I was not building any particular tank, but rather a fictitious abandoned vehicle, this kit was more than fine. There are few photo-etched bits included in the box, like this big cooling grill on top of the transmission compartment in the back, and also a few straps for the external fuel tanks. And even though not mentioned in the instructions as the photo-etched part, this upper fairing for the gun mountlet is also indeed a metal part. But these smaller grills on top of the engine compartment are sadly only cast in plastic, as the recess is, in the stark contrast with the cooling grill on top of the transmission compartment, as I mentioned before. But luckily I was able to find this accessory set from Def Model that, along with the external stove, which I won't be using, includes exactly the parts to assemble very nice grills on top of the engine compartment. These elevate the look of the model quite significantly. I also replaced plastic tracks from the kit with the articulated metal links by Master Club. While this is an expensive accessory, it does add a lot of realism and convincing detail to the finished model. After a bath in burnishing fluid for metal tracks, they acquire a dark metallic look that will be a nice base for some rust pigments later on. As I studied the available photos and the idea of what I wanted to achieve congealed, I realized that I need some details of the engine itself to be visible. So I sourced also the MiniArts engine and transmission set for T-34. This set is not specifically designed for this kit, but it's fitting surprisingly well nevertheless. I just added wiring according to the references and went on with the build. The rest of the tank was simple to assemble, and there were no fit issues to talk about. I cut off parts of mudguards, added some bends to the remaining pieces, and also added damage to the rubber surfaces on the road wheels. There are only 5 road wheels, an idler, and a drive sprocket per side. So in that regard, T-34 is probably the most beginner-friendly tank. The first component to receive paint and then also experience the rapid aging process was the engine subassembly. This is where I tested the chipping effects in a contained area, a method that will be crucial for the exterior of the tank later on. Engine grease, oil, and winter grime weathering products were also used here. I replaced thick plastic holders for the external fuel drums from the kit with homemade parts made of brass strips and small bits from the spare box. After this, the upper and lower hull were closed and all the open engine hatches masked off from the view and incoming paint. Rust is to be the hero of this tale, so I bought a set of red-brownish acrylic paints that claim to create an impression of ferrous metal left to the elements for too long. All I can say is shake them well before expecting pleasing results. Water acrylics are notoriously ill-tempered when spraying with an airbrush. However, rust is supposed to have a rough, uneven surface. So, as long as you use a large nozzle, say 0.4 millimeters or above, you'll be just fine. Spraying different shades of rust through some random pattern stencils can help a lot here as well. I mean, this does look like corrosion to me. I was tempted to leave it as is and go build an aeroplane again. In his groundbreaking film from 1968 named A Space Odyssey 2001, Stanley Kubrick managed to suggest millennia of human evolution with a single cut. I will now attempt a much smaller jump in this video, not trying to match Stanley, but simply lacking the material for the steps in between. So here we go. From this to this. When I built this model, I really didn't have a foresight of becoming a content creator on YouTube. Sorry. I will, however, try to explain the painting and weathering process and tell you what I've learned during this build. May you want to do something similar. This rich and complex finish can be achieved following some simple steps and working in layers, thanks to amazing hobby products that we have available today. After a coat of rust tones you saw before, I sprayed a thin layer of matte varnish and then a liberal coat of chipping fluid. When this was dry, I started with the green paint. Ignoring advice by Mick Jimenez, to use much lighter tone of green when attempting to expose a lot of rust underneath, I first tried to match my green with some standards for tank camouflage, but these were very dark, and the result was that I had to strip the paint completely and start again. Use the lightest green you can find. The one I ended up using was from my aircraft range. I tried to create some visual interest by contrasting adjacent panels in levels of exposed rust. Green paint was sprayed in thin layers and uneven across the surfaces. Thin paint chips much easier, and the unevenness creates faded chips, all contributing to a more believable appearance. The process can be repeated as many times as needed. Just protect the previous work with a matte coat of varnish. There are no decals on this model. I painted some custom markings inspired by those seen on the archival photos. On the right side of the turret, there are hand-painted letters J and A, standing for Yugoslav National Army, whereas on the opposite side I drew Serbian cross with 4 fire steels. This is a heraldic symbol stemming from times of the Byzantine Empire. Today we see it on Serbian coat of arms. To brush paint these symbols, I used washable white by Ammo. As the name suggests, this paint can be washed off with water, producing a nice weathered effect. Bands of colors for the national flag of Serbia were also painted on the gun barrel and then heavily chipped. Golden age of scale modeling can be overwhelming sometimes. Here's a selection of weathering products, all aiming at a similar goal, but still having unique effects that can be complementary. This so-called shader by Ammo is a water-based product that can be brushed on or sprayed as a color filter of a sort. I used it on a gun mantlet, for example, to give a bit more tonal depth and shift the hue towards orange. Then we have a classic enamel wash. This is very good for recesses and seams, but also to frame raised details or create splatter, for example. Rust pigment can be applied on its own or also mixed with enamels or even acrylics. I use this one for the track links quite a bit. And finally, these strange containers, looking like they belong in your girlfriend's makeup bag, are actually artist oils, repacked in a ready-to-use format, no preparation or cleanup required. Do you really need all these to finish a model? No, not really. But are they useful and nice to have? Oh yeah. After all is said and done, the model finally looked like you see it here. Of course, there were many small steps that I missed, but the overall process should be clear. It was time to put this T-34 in its context. Using a slab of hard architectural board as a base, I started applying pieces of turf from a pre-made mat using dark earth acrylic paste by AK to bond the turf with the uneven terrain. A broken down wooden fence was created from strips of balsa dipped in wood stain and then weathered using oils. This pastoral piece of land, usually associated with a slow and simple village life, is now contrasted by this decaying remnant of the war. Open hatches in the back give the idea of possible engine problems. The crew's attempts to repair it failed, maybe due to the lack of spare parts or tools. Maybe they ran out of time. Faced, perhaps, with the advancing enemy, they had to abandon the tank. The turret is rotated to provide more space for the repairs, or possibly as the last-ditch effort to defend the position from the foes in that direction. Mismatched road wheels hint at the long service and eventful past of this old machine. Many such examples can be seen in the photographs. The tank appears stripped of all external equipment. Did its crew took it with them, or was it a loot for the enemy? It doesn't really matter. You can tell your own story about its fate. Abandoned by its crew and now robbed of all purpose, it is too heavy to be moved. Left for the nature to deal with it as the nature does with all things. A brooding reminder of the latest of many wars that passed through these lands. Yet the hope remains that maybe, just maybe, this might be the last one. Did you like this video? If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment or a question if you have one. I will try to answer the best I can. Also, share the link with a friend who might like it too. Until the next one, my friends, peace and love.